The story happened roughly 15 years ago, and I just had to share it. Now that the company is dissolved, I shouldn't get into any trouble for sharing. I used to work for a company that built cars. I won't name the brand name or its location for privacy reasons. I worked in the finishing 2 department. Now, it's important to know the layout of our department. In our department, the actual frame of the car would be brought through on a massive assembly line. We had 3 lines in our department each for a different make of vehicle. There were 2 high pots on each line. These high pots were massive, probably the size of a pole barn and basically a building within the building. The first high pot on each line was a giant washer that would spray the unpainted frame down with silica, which is a very toxic chemical many factories use at a boiling 500 degrees Fahrenheit. This was done to clean off any impurities in the frame, and the silica made the paint stick to the frame better. After leaving the first high pot, it would go to the second one where the frame was dunked, flipped over, dragged, and pulled out of the giant pool of paint by a robot, and then sent down the line after going through the dryer. Anyway, these high pots have certain safety features on them. One being if you open a door while it's running, it trips the e-stop and sets off the alarms. However, the machine has to be stopped from the outside before the doors to it will unlock, and there's no stop button inside them. This will be important later. Anyway, we had this supervisor named Christy, and let me tell you, she was a bitch. Christy was a redhead in her 30s who didn't really care about anything. I literally heard her tell someone, "Look, I don't care if you have a heart attack and die." Yeah, she's that kind of person. She didn't really bother me too much. However, there was one employee over at the other high pot line that she had it out for. Armando. Armando was a Mexican guy in his 40s who had apparently immigrated to the United States only 4 years prior. He had been working there for roughly 1 year at this point. He was quiet, but he did a good job. Christy wouldn't leave him alone though, and whenever she thought nobody was listening, she would walk by him and just make really awful comments. One day I heard her walk by him and make an awful joke that I won't even repeat here. Little did she know this would set Armando over the edge. Later that day, I was running my line when I heard the alarms for the high pot washer on Armando's line go off. It probably just faulted out again, which actually happens regularly to all of our equipment. I didn't think much of it and just went back to my own line. 10 minutes later, I hear the alarms go off again, this time in a different tone, signaling the high pot is starting up. Then I hear screaming. Christy's muffled screaming. I look over and I see Christy in one of those plexiglass windows of the high pot washer screaming and banging on the door as the hot silica is being sprayed on her. I then look over to Armando and I'm expecting him to hit the e-stop or do something. But he doesn't. He just stands there watching with his arms crossed. I quickly run over the walkovers that cross over the conveyors. I have to cross 3 of those to get in his line, which takes about 1 minute. I run over to the control panel and press the e-stop, which unlocks all the doors on the high pot washer and sets off the alarms as well. Christy stumbles out of the access door to the high pot, and I'll never forget the horrifying scene of flesh melting away from her bones and blood beginning to ooze out that awaited me. Eventually, paramedics arrived and Christy was taken away, and Armando was taken away in handcuffs by the police. Apparently what happened is Armando stopped the washer and then just walked away. When Christy noticed it was down, she came over to investigate, and then went inside it as well when she didn't see Armando around. Armando then shut the door behind her and locked it and then started it back up again, spraying her to death with scalding hot silica. Apparently he was so sick of her harassment, and apparently HR had done nothing about it, that he just finally snapped. Armando was actually sentenced to life in prison for this, and Christy ended up dying from her injuries. OSHA began an investigation. However, the company went bankrupt 2 years later before the investigation was even finished, and the building was eventually demolished. I still think about that to this day, and I can't imagine a more horrifying way to die. My name is Reed, and I'm a 25-year-old male. This is about the time I had a stalker at my job at a restaurant where I worked as a bartender. I never thought much about the people I worked with at the restaurant. It was just a job, something to pay the bills while I figured out the rest of my life. I bartended every night, working the late shift. Most of the customers were regulars, old faces, late night drunks, the occasional couple on a date. Nothing ever really stood out. That is, until I met her. Her name was Clara. She started about 3 weeks after I did, filling in for shifts when we got slammed. She wasn't anything special at first, just another person trying to get by. Tall, dark hair, a little too much makeup for the job. I never paid her much attention, just another face behind the counter. But there was something about her that just started to feel off. It was little things at first, like how she always stood just a little too close when we talked, or how she'd smile just a bit too long when she handed me an order. I didn't think much of it. I just chalked it up to her being new, maybe a little nervous around me or the job. But then it kept happening. She'd linger around the bar when it wasn't her shift, watching me work, asking if I needed help when I clearly didn't. She'd comment on how I made drinks or how I interacted with the customers, even though she wasn't exactly an expert herself. I caught her looking at me from across the room, her gaze lingering just a little too long. At first, I figured I was just imagining it, but after a few nights, I started to feel more like she was studying me. One evening, I was wiping down the bar after the last call when she came over. She had this tight smile on her face, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're really good at what you do," she said, her voice soft but not exactly casual. "You've got this ease about you." I smiled back, kind of unsure on how to respond. "Thanks, I've been at it for a while." She nodded, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the bar almost absent-mindedly. Then she said, "Maybe we could hang out sometime. You know, outside of this place." I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't rude, but I wasn't interested either. "I don't really think that'd be a good idea," I said, trying to keep my tone friendly. "I'm actually pretty busy outside of work." Her face faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, no worries. Just thought I'd ask." The next night, she had handed me a folded piece of paper when no one else was looking. She smiled like it was some kind of secret. "Just in case you change your mind," she said softly. "I'd like to spend more time with you." I opened the paper after she left. It was a phone number. I wasn't really sure what to make of it. I didn't want to be rude, so I pocketed it, figuring I could just ignore it if it came to that. But the whole interaction left a weird feeling in my stomach. Something didn't feel right. The following week, Clara's behavior escalated. She started showing up at the bar on nights when she wasn't scheduled to work. I'd be mixing drinks, and there she was, sitting at the counter with her usual drink, just watching me. At first, I thought she was just a regular customer, but then I noticed how she'd order the same thing every night, sip it slowly, and watch me work as if she was analyzing every little thing I did. I'd catch her staring at me when I wasn't looking, and when I did look up, she'd quickly glance away like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't have. The worst part was how she never seemed to talk to anyone else. She'd just sit there waiting for a moment when I wasn't busy to talk to me. I started to feel trapped, like I was walking a tightrope, unsure when she'd cross the line between friendly and, well, something else. One night after the bar had slowed down, I was wiping down the counter when she slid into the seat right in front of me. "Reed," she said softly, almost like she was telling me a secret. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately." I froze, the rag in my hand pausing mid-air. I tried to laugh it off. "Well, it's not like we don't see each other enough here." She didn't smile. "No, I mean, I really think we have something special. You're not like the other guys. You don't just see me as a bartender. You see me." I wasn't sure what to say to that. I didn't feel any special connection whatsoever. Nothing like that anyways. "I don't know what you mean, Clara." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the bar toward me. "It's for you. Just a little something." I hesitated, then took it. Inside was a card, a personal one, the kind you give someone you had a history with, not someone you just met. The note was simple but chilling. "We're meant to be together, Reed. I know you feel it too." I felt my stomach drop. My thoughts raced, but before I could say anything, she stood up and left, leaving me with that feeling of unease deep in my bones. That's when it started. The weird notes, the unexpected visits to my apartment, the awkward forced interactions where I'd try to be polite, but she just wouldn't take the hint. She started to follow me after work, waiting outside the restaurant sometimes, watching me walk to my car. She'd smile and wave, but I'd get in my car as quickly as I could, my hands shaking on the wheel. I couldn't take it anymore. One night after I got off late, I found a note on my windshield. "I know where you live, Reed. I'll be there soon." I went cold. I didn't know how she found out where I lived, but I couldn't ignore it. This wasn't some harmless crush anymore. She was stalking me. I had to talk to my manager. I told him everything. How Clara was making me uncomfortable. How I was scared to come to work. How I was feeling trapped by her constant presence. He listened, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. It was hard for him to believe me at first. But when I showed him the note on my windshield, his face dropped. The next day, Clara was fired. I'd heard from the other staff that she had been let go for unprofessional behavior. They didn't go into details, but I knew it was more than that. I wasn't the only one she had been bothering. Apparently, she'd been sending strange texts to a few other coworkers too, but I didn't find that out until later. My manager called me into his office after her firing. He seemed genuinely sorry about what had happened. "I know it's been rough," he said, "and I just want you to know if you ever want your job back, it's yours. But I didn't want to come back. I couldn't. I didn't feel safe there anymore. Not after everything that happened. The restaurant had been my escape, my routine, but it had turned into a place of anxiety. A place where I constantly looked over my shoulder. No amount of money was worth the constant fear I'd felt. I appreciate the offer," I told him, "but I can't come back. It's just too much." I walked away from that job and I never looked back. It wasn't easy. Money was tight for a while, but I eventually found something else, something safer, quieter. But even now, there are moments when I'm walking down the street at night and I feel like I'm being watched. I'm always on edge, always checking over my shoulder. I don't know where Clara is now, or if she's even still out there. Maybe she's moved on to someone else, but I've learned that some things just stay with you even after they're gone. And for me, the worst part isn't even the fear anymore. It's the question that keeps me up some nights. What if she's still out there, waiting for me to slip up again? But that's a problem for someone else now. For me, well, I'm done. It was July 2011. I had just turned 21 and was living in the Piedmont region of North Carolina. Dating apps were still in their infancy, and I found myself gravitating towards Craigslist personals. It was raw, anonymous, and wide open, each post a gamble. Users would write short ads with vague descriptions. Sometimes they included a blurry photo. Most of the time, it was just a few bold sentences dangling mystery and danger. Young and naive, I wasn't looking for love, just a quick, exciting connection. I responded to one listing that immediately caught my eye. A woman replied almost instantly, which both surprised and excited me. Our chat started off innocent enough. Greetings, interests, light flirting. But soon, we were diving into fantasies of what we might do if we met. It was PG-13, at least for that era, and I was buzzing with adrenaline. After about 30 minutes, she asked for a picture. I sent her a selfie and requested one in return. What I received was a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s. She had shoulder-length blonde hair, hazel eyes, a warm smile, and breasts that seemed designed to scramble in the mind of a 21-year-old boy. Her body wasn't toned, but she appeared healthy, normal, like someone's attractive suburban mom. I was hooked. Then she asked, "Are you generous?" I didn't know what she meant. Generous how? Time, compliments? But I didn't want to sound dumb and risk ruining the moment. So I answered, "Of course I am." She then responded with, "Perfect," then gave me her address. She lived about 30 minutes away from me. I told her I'd head out right away. She replied, "Great, I'll get ready for you." The drive was a cocktail of excitement and nerves. I couldn't believe my luck. The idea that a woman like her wanted to meet me, just some skinny guy from the area, felt so surreal. But the closer I got, the quicker my confidence evaporated. The houses grew more run down, the yards cluttered with discarded furniture and trash bags. Streetlights flickered over cracked sidewalks and shuttered windows. I told myself not to judge her by where she lived. People fall on hard times, right? Still, the butterflies in my stomach started swarming into something darker. I arrived at a 2-story house. It wasn't as dilapidated as the others, which gave me a sliver of hope. I surveyed my surroundings carefully, marking anything that felt off. The street was quiet. No voices, no movement. Just the hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark from a dog down the block. Before getting out, I hid all of my belongings in the car so there'd be nothing tempting to steal. I carried only my phone and more shoes I could run in just in case. I climbed the steps and knocked. A woman's voice answered from inside. "Come in." The door creaked as I entered, and my senses were immediately assaulted. The inside was absolute chaos. Newspapers stacked to the ceiling, crusty takeout containers balanced on shelves, boxes stuffed with random junk, and cereal spilling all across the floor. The smell wasn't overpowering, but carried the unmistakable scent of decay. Straight ahead was a staircase leading to the second floor. To the left, a living room bathed in flashing TV light. A tall man sat on the couch, arms stretched across the backrest, staring at the screen like he was waiting for something, or someone. A chill ran through me. Who was he? Why didn't she mention anyone else being here? I called out, "Hey, where are you?" Her voice answered again, soft and sultry, this time from a room down the hallway. The man never once turned or spoke, just kept watching the screen like a silent gatekeeper. I moved cautiously, weaving through the towers of trash and grime. The hallway narrowed with debris, and the air grew heavier with each step. I peeked into the doorway and just froze. There she was, but she wasn't the woman from the photos. This woman was large, massive even. Her greasy brown hair hung limp, and the top of her scalp was patchy. Her face bore uneven makeup, with a few prominent moles barely masked. When she smiled, I only saw a handful of teeth behind streaks of red lipstick. She sat on what I assumed was a queen-size mattress, though most of it was buried under the trash. Her breasts barely sat inside a sheer stained nightgown. They hung to her knees as she sat wide-legged, motioning for me to come closer. But what truly turned my stomach wasn't her appearance. It was the environment. The bed she sat on looked molded, collapsing beneath her weight. Roaches scurried out from the mounds of trash she shifted to make space. The room was a biohazard. She gestured for me to sit beside her. I took one hesitant step in, still unsure how to exit without escalating things. She asked, "What would you like to see, dear?" while fondling herself. Then she said, "So, how generous are you going to be tonight?" Confused, I asked, what do you mean exactly?" She giggled. "How generous are you going to be with your payment?" Suddenly, it clicked. Generous was code. This wasn't a hookup. This was a transaction. I began backing out of the room, apologizing profusely. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I didn't know this was that kind of arrangement. I was halfway down the hallway when the man from the couch stood up, now blocking the door. I felt the walls closing in. He was huge, easily 6'8", broad and unmoving. Behind me, the woman stormed into the doorway. "You wasted my time and you're not even going to pay for it?" she hissed. The man crossed his arms and spoke in a voice like steel. "It's either you pay for the time you wasted or I'll take the payment from you, little man." Fear pulsed in my chest. I was alone in a strange house, cornered. I had no backup, but then I thought of a way out. I stood tall. Well, as tall as a 5'5" guy could at 120 pounds. I then said, "If you really think I came out here without telling someone where I'm going, you're absolutely stupid. I told my friend before I left to expect a call within 45 minutes. If they don't hear from me, they're calling the cops." He squinted at me. "You're bluffing." "You sure you want to take that gamble?" I said, pointing toward the window, "because I smelled weed from the sidewalk and the cops will too. You let me walk out right now and I'll forget this ever happened. But if you make this hard, you'll have 2 squad cars parked here in less than 10. Dead silence followed. Then the man turned to her and shrugged. "Look, this one's not worth it. Don't you have someone else coming later on?" She nodded, and without another word, the man stepped aside. I didn't wait. I walked out that door calmly, controlled, never turning back, never saying a word. I got in my car and drove off. The moment I was out of sight, I screamed. Relief, shock, anger. I was lucky, and I never went on Craigslist again. So picture this. It's about 4 in the morning. One of those cold, damp London weekdays where the air feels heavy and clings to you. I'd fallen down a video game rabbit hole, surfaced hours later, and I realized 2 things. 1, it was obscenely late, and 2, I'd completely forgotten to eat dinner. A quick, desperate scan of the kitchen confirmed the worst. Nothing. Damn it. My only hope was the 24-hour McDonald's drive-thru down the road. It's maybe a 10-minute walk, mostly through quiet suburban streets that feel almost unnervingly still at that hour. Coat on, I headed into the pre-dawn gloom. Habit took over, and I immediately stuck in my earphones, scrolling through my phone to catch up on the messages and notifications I'd blissfully ignored for the past several hours. In hindsight, I know exactly how that looks. Headphones in, face lit by a phone screen, completely oblivious to the world at 4 a.m. Prime target material, basically. I was about halfway there when I had registered movement just behind me. I glanced back. There was a guy swallowed by an oversized hoodie riding a bicycle. Except it wasn't a normal bike. It was painfully obviously a child's pink bicycle. The tiny frame looked ridiculous underneath him. He wasn't going anywhere specific, just doing slow wide loops on the empty street, always ending up slightly behind me. Now, I've lived in London for about 3 years. You see weird stuff. It's part of the background noise. My default programming kicked in. Head down, keep walking. Don't make eye contact. He'll get bored eventually. You know, standard operating procedure for navigating the city's low-level strangeness. But then he wasn't behind me anymore. He smoothly cycled up right alongside me, matching my pace. The ignore it strategy suddenly felt very thin. He was muttering something. It was clear he wanted my attention. Reluctantly, I pulled out one earbud, still walking, trying for casual indifference. My automatic defense mechanism fired off before I even properly heard him. "I'm sorry, I don't have any change." That's when I made the mistake of actually looking at him. He wasn't asking for change. His eyes locked onto mine, and there was a hard, focused intensity there that immediately set off alarm bells. My gaze flickered down. His right hand was shoved deep into the front pocket of his hoodie, pushing the fabric outwards. Oh, it wasn't a slow dawning realization. more like a sudden plunge into ice water. The casual weirdness evaporated, replaced by cold, sharp-edged fear. That's when I properly registered his words, spoken low but clear. "Give me your phone." My feet kept moving, seemingly on autopilot, but the rest of me felt frozen. My brain felt like it was buffering, trying to process the demand against the very real possibility of what was in that pocket. Is he bluffing? Is that a knife? Is this phone I literally just got and definitely can't afford to replace, worth getting stabbed over? The mental calculus was frantic and terrifying. We were still moving forward side by side in this bizarre, terrifying mobile standoff. Me staring straight ahead, hyper aware of him right beside me and my mind racing. And then a sound. The distinct rumble of a car engine growing louder. Headlights swept across the end of the street, illuminating the junction just yards ahead. A brief moment of blinding light. I shot a look back at the guy on the tiny pink bike. The thought flashed. Run! Make a break for the car, for the light. But before the thought could even translate into action, he abruptly swerved. He pushed off hard on the tiny pedals, cycling rapidly down the street, disappearing back into the shadows as quickly as he'd appeared. I just stood there for a second, heart hammering against my ribs. Then the next thought hit me. Crap, I still have to walk home. Needless to say, the McDonald's craving vanished instantly. On the way back, the headphones stayed off, and my phone stayed deep in my pocket, clutched in my hand. I also gave the quiet suburban streets a wide berth. Instead, I took the long way round, sticking to the main A road. It's noisy, choked with fumes even at this hour, and the pavement is basically a narrow, neglected strip inches away from speeding traffic. It felt horrible, but infinitely safer. The constant stream of headlights, the drone of engines. It was unpleasant, but it was a presence. Company of a sort. Thankfully, the rest of the walk was uneventful. No more unexpected cyclists emerged from the dark. But yeah, I'm just really glad that it wasn't as bad as it could have been. Guy on a tiny pink bike at 4 a.m. demanding my phone. Hopefully I don't ever encounter you again.